We can begin. Peace and blessings, my brother. How are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing really good. First of all, let me just thank you. We're both on different sides of the planet, so I know us scheduling these interviews is sometimes difficult, but I appreciate you taking time out of your day. And what I'm doing is a project called Islamic Orders of Hip Hop. And what it really inspired that is looking back on what they call the golden era of hip hop music, the differences between how things were then and how things are now. And I realized that
Hmm.
there is an absence of righteousness, an absence of education, an absence of positivity in the music without Islam being in. Now, some people might disagree with the term Islam because of their Christianity or what have you, but at the end of the day, you can't argue that things were more positive and more educational during that period. So my goal is to curate the impact and influence of Islam on hip hop in its various iterations and provide that so that people could just have a record of it. Because I think one day the day is gonna come when they're gonna try to wipe it out totally. They've already changed hip hop so much when they got their hands on it. Eventually, you're gonna just completely wipe out the positive history, the Islamic history, the Black empowerment history, and we don't want that to happen. So that's the goal of this project
Yeah.
that I'm working on.
All right.
Okay,
Okay.
and first of all, I want you just introduce yourself to people who are gonna watch the video and give them a little information about yourself.
Sure. So I am yeah, I call myself, let's say, Sufi Alchemy. I started doing social media in the 2020s when I studied Sufism, and yeah, that's basically it. I started on Instagram, started doing different kinds of spiritual content. That then I was sort of wondering a little bit on how to get more views, and slowly but surely I started mixing in news, geopolitics, Black history, and these kinds of things, and in that context also hide a little bit of spiritual teachings, because I noticed that if you go on the deep mysticism, it usually is too deep for people who don't practice spirituality and who are not active in it. So I would sort of tone it down a little bit and do it a little bit more exoteric and deal with the sort of everyday stuff. Yeah, that's about it. I'm an economist by profession, a master's degree in financial economics. Yeah, work in the financial services sector. From sort of Afro-European, you can say. I live in Netherlands, Amsterdam, of Fulani descent.
Gotcha. Okay. And we're talking about Islam, but I realize in studying Islam in the hip hop culture, there's a lot of iterations of it. There's a lot of interpretations of it. But there
Mm-hmm.
is like what do you think is the central core meaning that binds them all together? What exactly is meant by the term Islam?
Well, so Islam has levels of understanding what Islam is. To most people in the West, Islam would be one of the Abrahamic religions. You have Judaism, Christianity. Judaism is quite small, by the way. It's like 7, 10, 20 million people or something like that. Then you have Christianity, some 2 billion, and Islam approaching sort of 1 point maybe 9 billion or something like that. So they would see it as a religion, a part of the, uh, Abrahamic religions. But there's a deeper level of understanding of what Islam is. In the Quran, it says Deen Allah, the Deen of Allah. So, and Deen usually is translated as religion, but Deen does not exactly mean religion. It means more way of life. So Islam is essentially the way of life of Allah.
Gotcha. That statement in and of itself is a lot to unravel. The way of life.
Yeah, definitely,
That yeah.
definitely.
Whoa, that just blew my mind a little bit. So what I want to know is when they say the way of life of Allah. Now we gotta unpack that just a little bit. I know you can't give them too much, but you gotta
Yeah,
unpack that a little
sure.
bit.
So because and it goes deeper, and it goes straight to the mystical sort of levels, that if Allah or God has always existed, man may also have always existed. There has always been a way of life, uh, and this was actually called in sort of, let's say, Indus Valley culture, Dharma or something like that, Sanatana Dharma, eternal Dharma, the eternal law, or eternal way of life. And if you look at the Semitic word deen in Hebrew and Aramaic, it's actually kind of means the same thing. So this idea that God has always existed and there's always been a way of life of God, or a righteous way to live, and that is this way that we call Islam, and it has been revealed in different stages. You can say, according to a more classical Sunni way of viewing it, it has been revealed in different stages.
Gotcha, understood. Now you said right now you're living in the Netherlands. I want
Yeah.
to know, where are you from originally, and what was your introduction to hip hop in that culture?
Sure. I'm born and raised in Stockholm, Sweden. That's like in the Nordic northern part of the world. I guess that many people in America don't really know much about Sweden, and some people sort of take sort of Sweden and Switzerland to be the same country, but it is actually not Switzerland. It's in the Nordic. Has been in the news lately because of the Russia-Ukrainian war, and Sweden is a new member, soon to be in NATO, quite close to Russia. While Finland, which is a neighbor of Sweden, is actually border to Russia in the north. Yeah, so hip hop. I mean, hip hop is quite big in Sweden. You have Swedish rap, which is basically a Swedish version of it. Nowadays, actually, Swedish rap is very, very gangster, because
really?
It's hardcore. It has turned really hardcore by some of the gangs who actually sometimes they use rap songs against gangsters in court, because they reveal.
Wow.
So it has gone really, really deep. But you also have the American hip hop. I guess my first exposure to hip hop was when I was 10 years old, and my brother played Dr. Dre's The Chronic. So and since that, I used to listen to hip hop. I mean, all of my teenage years, most rappers that you could mention during the 2000s, I've probably listened to.
Okay, gotcha. Now you are following Tariqa. You're a Sufi.
Yes.
Okay, and as a Sufi, as somebody who is following that path, what is typically the reaction to the Islam that you hear in hip hop over here in the West? Is there any controversy, or do they feel like, whoa, that's not really Islam, or is it kind of just accepting the different interpretations of it?
You mean the reaction in the surroundings?
Yes.
Yeah. So I am. That's a complicated question. I think that in America, if I've understood the situation in America correctly, this Salafist Islam is really dominating in America. So immediately, if you mention something Sufi or something like that, people start, yelling and acting with bad manners. But the thing is, if you look at the country, these countries like in the Nordics, you have many immigrants who come from Muslim countries. You have, Iraqis, Palestinians, lots of people from Iran. You have lots of people from Afghanistan. You have some North Africans, West Africans. In the Muslim world, I would suggest that what we call Sufi Islam is the dominant form of Islam, but it's not known as Sufi Islam. It's just known as Islam, or Sunnah, or something like that. So it's not that shocking or not that controversial in the Nordics, because you have many people who actually come from Muslim countries, and they have these kinds of roots, believe it or not. Yeah. Gotcha. If you don't make a big deal out of the word Sufi, if you start talking about the word Sufi, then people may feel confused. Are you creating sects? Or that there are no sects in Islam? No, we agree. This is Quran. They don't make sects out of your religion. But yeah. So as long as you don't talk too much about the word Sufi and try to brand yourself as something different, it's usually quite fine in my experience.
Gotcha. And that brings me to another question that I have, because I think that one of the major issues that we have over here in the West is the misunderstanding. You said that you don't call it Sufism over there. You just call it Islam. So over here in the West, a lot of people kind of have this idea that there's Islam and then there's Sufism. So explain what exactly is a Sufi.
That is yeah, and that is a problem in my opinion, and that
Right.
comes. I think
And that's
that
that's and I apologize because I think in the Western world there's a lot of ignorance in regards to that. So that's why I want you to clarify
yeah,
things.
yeah, no, sure. Let's look at it. And what I think happened, if I understand the history correctly, you have some of these shuyukh who came to America, such as from the Inayati order, which is actually Chishti. It is Chishti order, Sufi tariqa from India.
Mhm.
You also had, these people from Mevleviya, the Turkish order of Maulana Rumi. And these people came to America. And how can we teach this way to the people in America? And started, teaching it in a Western way. So I would attribute the methodology to be Western because you speak to Western people,
Mhm.
and trying to lift forward and explain what, let's say, Sufi Islam to a Western audience who
Mhm.
may be Christian and may be generationally Christian and have a difficult time understanding Islam. So they taught it this way. And at some point, when they focused on this Western crowd, mainly I would say Chishti and Mevlevi, there may have been people at home in India or in Turkey who saw that and said, no, this is not how we teach tariqa, and this is different. Maybe there was some kind of misunderstanding, or maybe there was some kind of, it started becoming so Western that it started deviating. So this idea of Sufism started very much being promoted, I think, by these early shuyukh who came to America
Mhm.
with their whirling, and this is essentially Mevlevi. It's Mevlevi, and I think it's like an Ottoman tradition.
Mhm.
This turning is Ottoman. Turks would do that, and things like this. So at some point, I think there was a misunderstanding with the intention and how you teach Islam to the West. For example, talking a lot about the love. There was one sheikh, I don't remember his name. He was a Mevlevi sheikh. He was actually an American who converted. Kabir Helminski. Kabir Helminski.
Mhm.
And he converted, and he's a Mevlevi. He translated a lot of the Rumi's work into English, and coming from a Western background, he understands sort of Christianity and God is love and these kinds of things. Maybe he forwarded that and those kinds of teachings, and essentially tried to teach it to Christians. And at some point, then the Muslim world started, no, that's different from us.
Gotcha.
But there was something lost in the translation, something lost in the differences in the cultures, I feel. So
Gotcha.
a little bit of an unnecessary, you can say, misunderstanding or branching off, in my
Right.
opinion.
Gotcha. Understood. Um, do you think that there is a direct Sufi influence on hip hop music? Looking back at artists like Rakim, artists like the Wu-Tang Clan, artists like Nas, do you see like Sufi impact on their music, on their lyrics?
Well, what I would say with hip hop, without being an expert on exactly those artists, is that I think hip hop has been very influenced by the general Black Power movement.
Mhm.
And if you look at some of the revolutionaries in the Black nationalist movement, such as Nation of Islam and other forces
Mhm.
that have influenced a lot of rappers, and probably even the Crips and the Bloods originally,
Mhm.
their theology, or if you dig deeper into it, is a kind of what you can call Sufi Islam. I would say, or classical Sunni or classical Islam. So yes, definitely, in the way that Sufi Islam has sort of impacted the Black nationalist movement through these different sort of organizations. You have also Moorish science and all of these kinds of things. I would say that they are different versions of what you call Sufi Islam, or just Islam, or the old way of Islam.
Okay. All right, awesome. There's a writer named Michael Muhammad Knight who coined the phrase "taqwa core." I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it correctly, but that term is a term that's essentially for Muslims who play punk rock and engage in the punk rock scene. Was there ever a movement like that that you saw for hip hop, where you are, where you've been over in the East?
Um, so sorry, I'm not following. Like, what was the term?
The term was talk. I'm probably saying it wrong. Takwa core, which means
Takwa.
takwa. Yeah, takwa.
Okay.
Takwa core, and that was sort of a punk rock movement for individuals who are Muslim and wanted to engage in rock and roll music and be a part of the culture. And I was just asking if they were. Have you ever seen anything like that as far as hip hop, where there was a direct Muslim movement in hip hop over where you are?
Um, well, I mean, I'm not familiar of any kind of, direct, let's say, Islamization of hip hop or Islamic rap or something like this, because during the time when hip hop started coming up in the 80s and the 90s, you at the same time had this dominant Salafi form of Islam, which comes
Right.
from Saudi Arabia,
Mm-hmm.
which for me is not a I'm not saying that Salafis are non-Muslim or they're evil people or disbelievers or anything sort of rude like that. I just don't think that that is a proper and classical way of understanding Islam. And they have this music is haram type of
Mm-hmm.
thing. So that music is evil. All of music is just evil, and it should be banned. Probably stops many people from daring to mention anything Islamic in in essentially hip hop music. I remember Busta Rhymes once said "Salamu alaikum" or something like that in one of his rap songs, and immediately there was a guy from the Middle East who started criticizing that. So you have Talib Kweli. I mean, Talib is a Muslim name, and
Mm-hmm.
you have many rappers who are Muslim. Ice Cube is a Muslim also,
Mm-hmm.
but a specific sort of Islamic branch of hip hop, at least not something that I am directly familiar with. More, I would say, than Christian elements in hip hop.
Okay. Gotcha. I wanted to ask about the terminology Mahdi. We you mentioned on your Instagram page
Mhm. Mhm.
Muhammad Ahmad. I told you I was gonna get the book. I actually got the
Oh
book.
yeah, yeah, Muhammad
Started,
Ahmed,
yeah, and
from
I started,
Sudan.
yeah, I started doing a little bit of reading about it. But I want to get some clarity on what exactly that term Mahdi mean and what the Mahdi was supposed to accomplish.
All right, the Mahdi or Imam Mahdi is a prophecy of a. So it is within the general, I would say, what we call eschatology, the
Mm-hmm.
end time prophecies, and all religions deal with the end times or the last days. That would
Mm-hmm.
be the Revelation chapter of the Bible. You have figures like Maitri in Hinduism. Maitri is essentially some kind of prophecy of this end time savior that is going to come during the end times. And Imam Mahdi is a savior essentially that is going to come in the end times, and he's going to defeat the Antichrist. And the Antichrist is this great upside down turner of the world that makes heaven look like hell and hell look like heaven, and deceives even the wisest of people, and even divides religion and these kinds of things. So there is this sort of mythological battle between the Antichrist or the Dajjal, Masih Dajjal to be specific, and the Savior, which is Imam Mahdi. And different traditions, even different Sufi orders, and even the Shia have their own sort of theology and theories of when is the Mahdi gonna come? How is the Mahdi gonna look like? Who is the Mahdi? Who is not the Mahdi? And just if you look at something like Islamic history, and particularly in the classical world or the Sufi Islamic world, there has been different claims of
Mm-hmm.
Mahdi. And there has been saints who have come, who have specifically said, I am not the Mahdi. The Mahdi will come after me. And even Sheikh Nazim of the Naqshbandi wrote a lot about Imam Mahdi. Sheikh Ibrahim Nias stated he is not the Mahdi, and Muhammad Ahmed, I think some people called him the Mahdi. Also in the Ahmadiyya movement, the Grand Sheikh of the Ahmadiyya movement made the claim to be Mahdi.
Okay.
Some people rejected that, and that created the branching of the Ahmadiyyas from, you can say, the Sunni. I would still say that they are probably Sunni, but this Mahdi and claims of Mahdi is something that has happened and keeps on happening in the Islamic tradition, and different people have different opinions on that.
Okay, gotcha. And I found it interesting because in me putting together this project, it's great putting together this project and speaking to people and doing research because I learned a lot. One of the things I learned, the reason why I became interested in Muhammad Ahmad recently is because I was reading a book by Malachi York. Have you ever heard of him?
No, sorry.
Yeah, Malachi York is a teacher over here who has a lot of controversy. I won't go into all of it, but he started a group called the Ansar Movement, and he declared himself a descendant of Muhammad Ahmad and said that he is also Mahdi. And that's how through his Ansar movement, because he kind of rejuvenated the Ansar movement over here in the West, through his Ansar movement, that's how that idea kind of entered into hip hop. And there were a lot of hip hop artists who were really influenced by him. MF Doom was at one point in time an Ansar. Who else was it? It was a few, it was quite a few. Killer Priest from who was associated with the Wu-Tang Clan. He was associated with the Ansar movement when they became the Holy Tabernacle Ministries. Yeah, yeah. If you listen to, there's a song called From Atoms to Adam by Killer Priest. And that song is it's a lot of mystical stuff in it, but a lot of that came from Malachi York actually.
Okay, interesting. If I understand the Ansar movement correctly, I listened a little bit to Danjuma. He's a professor in history, and don't agree with everything he says, particularly not on the Fulani, but he talked quite a lot about the Ansar movement. I think he was a member of that, and he said that that spread to the Caribbean early.
Yeah, yeah.
And one of the reasons why the Caribbeans were maybe not that open to Nation of Islam was because they had heard something similar to that before through the Ansar movement.
Oh, okay.
From Muhammad Ahmed.
Yeah.
Or Ahmed Muhammad, I forget the name. Yeah. So yeah, very interesting. Very interesting. That would be the followers of these Sudanese sheikh.
Yeah. So when you think about Mahdi, your interpretation of it, your understanding of it, is the Mahdi a literal person or is it a metaphor for something deeper?
I think it's both. I think I would interpret it something like this personally. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, is that you can have Mahdis and then you have the Mahdi.
Okay.
So if you fulfill the prophecies and you have this being friend of Allah and awliya, essentially you're kind of a Mahdi in your own right. I mean, you have the right to interpret scriptures in that way, and if you do that and you believe that and people believe you, that is a manifestation of, let's say, the principle of Mahdi. It's a manifestation of the principle of Mahdi. Then who is the Mahdi? The polite thing to say about the Mahdi is Allahu Alam, or only Allah knows.
Right.
Only Allah knows who the Mahdi is, but I am sure that one day it's going to be revealed, and when it's going to be revealed, the believers are going to believe.
Gotcha. Do you think, and this might be a strange idea, but I've been kind of wondering if maybe if am I saying it correctly? Mahdi? Am I saying it correctly?
I mean, however you want. I understand.
Okay.
Yeah, what you mean? Yeah.
Okay. So I was thinking if Mahdi could be a metaphor, could an art form be Mahdi? Could hip hop in its pure form, with its spreading positivity, could that be kind of like a manifestation of Mahdi?
Yeah. I mean, could hip hop be a manifestation of, let's say, the metaphysical principle of Mahdi? Yes, but then it would have to fulfill those prophecies as well to transform people and to defeat the Antichrist. And if we look at hip hop today, hip hop seems to be defeated by, let's say, what some people would call globalists or deep state or Zionist control. I mean, there's this history, for example, with NWA and Jerry Heller, who started buying up the NWA and pushing gangster rap and those kinds of messages. So I would say that gangster rap and those types of messages would definitely not be Mahdi. That would then more be the principle of the Antichrist, because destroys. It sends the wrong. It teaches black people to be criminal, to shoot each other, and all of these negative messages that are actually not good, and they are very harmful, because that culture spreads everywhere in the neighborhoods in Europe, and people wanna be gangsters, and in a negative sense of it. I do think that gangs in the Black community have roots in African culture. These getting together in communes. I do think that's very African. So I do think gangs are African, but at some point when they start becoming criminal and self-destructive, then gangs turn into something negative. So in that sense, I would say hip hop, and there are many in the music industry who also talk about these parties and how they take certain people into the higher echelons, and that would then more be towards the Jalek side, or the Antichrists.
Gotcha.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, speaking about gangs, there's a young guy I met years ago who was in a gang. He was a Crip, and he was giving me some history. He was telling me that the Crips actually started off as a positive community thing. The term Crip, he says, stood for Community Renewal in Progress, because they took it upon themselves to want to bring peace to the community, and then somehow along the path it got corrupted. So yeah, you're right. A lot of these gangs started off as something positive. I heard the Blood Gang started off because a lot of Black people were being harassed and were being unfairly beaten. So the Bloods kind of formed to kind of protect the community. So it was positivity initially, and who knows? I'm not sure exactly when things went in a criminal direction, but
and that is why I also didn't want to just do the stereotypical to condemn gangs. I know a Swedish gang by the name Chosen Ones. It was actually started by Fulani, a Gambian Fulani. It had some of the same intentions, roots in Black Power movement, and strengthening the position of Black people. So the intention was good, but at some point, if there are no religious and spiritual teachings, the man's ego is going to take over, and when the ego takes over, the shaitan comes, and then the shaitan will deviate things, and
and that brings me to, you brought up a great point. That brings me to my next question. You're saying that when the gangster rap music took over, it seemed as if the positivity had been defeated. And I noticed as well that there's been a major and very rapid decline of Islamic references in hip hop music. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that over the years is the impact of Islam, and at least in Western hip hop, has kind of declined?
That's a good question. I would have to answer it with a little bit of, let's say, economic theory of let's say a more Marxist thinking. I'm not saying I'm a socialist or anything like that, but when we look at something like the means of production, who controls the capital, and who owns? Who is the true owner? Who is the true power? Because the problem with sort of Black or oppressed people is that Black people rarely control the actual capital or control the companies, the record labels. So they are, even if you can be talented as a rapper, you can do really hard, there's someone else who controls things. And that power, who is financed by very powerful forces, controls narratives. They can push certain policies. They can push certain agendas. They can force you to rap about certain things that they want you to rap about. And the bottom sort of does not have the control of the means of production. And as long as there is no control of the means of production, there is someone else who controls the means of production, who can is not going to give you a record label, a record contract, if you don't rap about what they want to rap about. And it's not just in hip hop. It is the same in other genres, like, for example, heavy metal. There are many great heavy metal artists that nobody knows about, that don't get record labels. And it was the same in the reggae movement, in the reggae dancehall movement. When Shabba Ranks and Buju Banton started coming up a lot, they started speaking against the LGBTQ, canceled. Canceled in the 90s immediately. It goes against certain agendas that those who are in power want to see, and they want to promote those agendas. So I think that's the problem. That's also what you saw with NWA. And probably something similar happened to Tupac Shakur. Tupac's first album was, in my opinion, pure Black consciousness. He even had a speech of Farrakhan in his first album. And then after that, and after that, it became, against the East, against the West, and against Biggie and all of these kinds of things. So, yeah.
Gotcha. Do you think that Islam can reinvigorate hip hop?
True Islam, yes. I think true Islam can transform anything to the positive. Allah can do what Allah wants.
Right.
And if you have the true way, the true way is always transformative. If it's not transformative, it's at least in my definition, it's not the true way. If whatever, let's say, religion or deen you practice, if it doesn't transform, it's not from God, in my opinion.
Right. And what you said about, who controls the labor, who controls the production is 100% correct. And one thing that I really, really love, at least over here in the West, you might not see mainstream hip hop using Islamic terminology and Islamic knowledge. But the cool thing about over here is all of a sudden there's this explosion of underground hip hop. And a lot of artists, I'll give you an example. There's a guy named Rock Marciano, and he's a 5%er. And, the mainstream, the mainstream, industry really doesn't have anything to do with him. They don't touch him. He stays away from them. He's strictly underground, but he makes his own music, produces his own music. He lives very comfortably. He goes on tour where he wants. So I think that's very, very true. I think if we seize control of our own means of production and own the means of production, you can do and say what you want to do and say. There's a lot of artists out there now doing and saying what they want, and things are slowly sliding back towards positivity in the underground.
Yeah, that's possible. And if we would see a resurgence of, let's say, positive hip hop that has a positive transformative effect, it would likely be underground.
Right, 100%. Is there like an underground hip hop movement where you are, and what do you see in that?
I'm not so active in the scene, but there definitely are underground artists. I'm just not so familiar about who they are and what they're rapping about, but there are definitely underground artists all over Europe that rap about their things and so on. I mean, even gangster rap in itself can be quite cool in the sense that it is truth, right? It's describing a reality. It's describing a reality about the neighborhoods and how people are actually living. It's true. It's real. It impacts you. You feel that you're in a neighborhood. The question I have is, how transformative is it?
Gotcha.
Does it transform? But there are underground artists. I'm just not familiar enough with the scene to be able to name them.
Okay, gotcha. Is there any Islamic music period outside of hip hop that you're listening to that you kind of groove into a little bit?
So with Islamic music, we can say, let's say, the nasheeds and the qasides and the zikr. I mean, in the Sufi or classical Sunni tradition, you would chant Quranic verses. You would chant these blessings on Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, salat ala nabi. You would do it. You would sometimes just do it with choir, sometimes with some lighter instruments. There definitely is such nasheeds, qasides. For example, from the Muridiya order in Senegal, they have all of the qasides or poems written by Serigne Touba. They chant them day in after day in after day in Touba, Senegal. That I listen a lot to. Also, Senegalese artists, for example, Baba Mal, he has very religious music. He would send blessings on Grand Shoe. For instance, he has the song for Imam Malik Sy, and Youssou N'Dour sings about Serigne Touba and these kinds of things. So they have a lot of that Islamic uh, Islamic Sufi, Islamic in it,
Mhm.
in West African music. Lots of it.
Gotcha. One thing that I heard recently is the Quran itself was meant to
Mm.
be sang and recited. But at the same
Yeah.
time, you mentioned that in amongst the Salafi, music is banned. When did this ban of music or this prohibition of music, when did that begin?
Yeah, so that's an interesting thing. So the Quran means the recitation. That
Mm,
is actually what Quran means. It means the recitation. Why is the Quran called the recitation? Because the Quran was recited originally by Prophet and Sahaba. They spoke it, they chanted the Quran. And later it was written down, but they would say that it was written down almost immediately after Prophet passed away. So it is the original recitation. Now, this recitation that you cite the Quran verbally is actually something that still exists in the Muslim world. In West Africa, children will, become what is it called? Hafiz of Quran. They would memorize the Quran at an early age. For example, Sheikh Ibrahim Yas, Sheikh Mahi Sise, Sheikh Hassan Sise, I think they memorized the Quran by age 8, 9,
wow.
10, like that.
Wow.
So people still learn today to memorize the entire Quran and chant it. So there has always been this tradition for 1,400 years. I'm sure it's still done in the Middle East. I don't know if the Salafis have erased all of this in the Middle East or not, but it used to be like that anyway. So, and when did this ban of music come? I would say that traditionally in Islam, in my opinion, music wasn't banned. It's just like, you have the good music and you have the harmful music. So maybe the
Gotcha.
harmful, negative, satanic music and maybe some instruments, I think the scholars are not completely in agreement which instrument should be allowed and which shouldn't be allowed. So you had the for example, during the um, Maulid, the celebration of Prophet's birthday, which is banned in the Middle East right now. The Salafis don't allow anyone to celebrate Prophet's birthday. It's still celebrated in West Africa, North Africa. You would have these, drums and these kinds of things and chant Salat al Nabi. But at some point, I don't exactly know when the Salafis decided to be extremely dogmatic and boring when it comes to music and take it to the ultra extreme and ban music. The funny thing is that in those Middle Eastern countries that have these Salafis that ban music, they have belly dancers. So they have half naked belly dancers. I've seen it myself in Dubai. So
So they
it's
they
it's
they
like
ban
it's
they
like
ban
officially
music.
banned, but unofficially those same people go and watch belly dancers. Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, that's you would think they'd ban the belly dances and let you rock the music, but like I guess
It's unbelievable. I was with some friends in Dubai, and we saw this, the Arabs with white, cloth, and then there was a belly dancer and all kinds of music and very, let's say, haram, very, very
yeah,
haram. And
yeah.
I even filmed it, and I said that if one Salafi ever tells me anything about music, I'm going to show this film. So they tend to do these kinds of things behind the scenes, but officially, music is haram. Don't touch it; it's evil.
Mhm.
As long as it's not their music, kind of. So, and I mean, you have plenty of music in the Middle East, Arab music, and so on. So it's. I'm not exactly sure if the music ban is Islamic or if it's more like our music is halal, but yours is haram, kind of like promoting their own economic interest to buy Arab music, which is halal. And that's
Wow.
kind of the same with the halal and haram food. I don't think that most halal food is actually halal. It is just certain brands that you're supposed to buy. So it's more economics and
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Understood. Wow. So I'm a person who I listen to music. I need music. Like when I get in the car with my kids, and my kids are like, "Daddy, come on, let's go." They know that the reason why I'm not driving is because I got to pick the right song to drive to.
Mhm.
I think music has a profound effect on human beings and just
Mhm.
changing our mind, put us in a positive mood. How do you think it affects people when they have those kinds of musical bands where it's like you can listen to this, but you got to stay away from all that other stuff. Does that affect you think that affects people's culture? How does it affect them psychologically?
Yeah, no, I do think that music is very powerful and transformative. You get very deep into the state, the spiritual state of the artists who produce music. There are many good forms of music, classical music, jazz, etc. That doesn't even have any lyrics, so you can't really argue it's halal or haram.
Mhm.
But yeah, I also grew up with music, and I think most people in the West grew up with music. But yeah, when you have these people who post themselves as authorities and want to, gatekeep what is right and what is wrong, it produces fear. And that's what it does. I think it produces fear.
Wow, fear of what?
uh, in fear of shaming, you're an evil person, and in the worst case, fear of alienation, that you're going to be maybe excluded or something like that, because from the commune, because you are doing something inappropriate or something like that. Yeah.
Wow, I never even thought about it like that. That's profound. That's very profound. Well, I'm gonna wrap it up now. I appreciate your time, my brother. This is always it's always very, very insightful. And I also want to thank you because there are so many people out there that think of Islam and their
Mhm.
idea of Islam is very strict, very dogmatic, very closed-minded. So I enjoy when we have these conversations because it allows people to see somebody who is very intelligent, very educated, very open-minded, and it's spreading positivity and love in the world. And I think that's an excellent thing for all of us to see Islam and for all of us to become more open-minded as to what Islam means and get a deeper understanding of it. So I really appreciate you, brother. I really appreciate your time.
All right, thank you very much. Thank
No
you very
problem.
much.
All right, man. You have
Take
a good
care.
one. You as well.
The same. Bye.
All right,
Bye.
peace. Yep.
Bye.